Hi, thank you very much for the introduction. So yes, I'm Chief Strategy Officer. I work at Virtue, which is a creative agency working from Vice. So we're independent from Vice. We don't have to execute on all of their platforms or anything like that, but we get to use all their good stuff. So I will try and talk to you about some of that today, and hopefully that will be useful. So I thought I'd talk first just a bit about the sort of consumer and cultural stuff that's going on. Obviously, we know this is a huge paradigm shift that brands are struggling to navigate. So changes that would normally happen over 30 years or a generation are happening in just a matter of weeks. And brands are obviously struggling to navigate. We know that. We're getting the panic briefs about what to do now, but also the what is it on the other side. If you're a brand, for example, that is heavily based on individualism, you might need to rethink that on the other side because, well, I'll talk about that in a minute, but the individualism might be made, we're seeing the signs that actually we might be moving towards a more collectivist mindset. But what we're seeing with consumers really is this sort of vacuum of uncertainty. So we did a big study with youth in pandemic, it's called, and just asked people what they were expecting on the other side of this. And there was quite a lot of optimism of maybe the world will get better like this or like this. But actually what we found is that when you just said, will the world be better or worse after this? It was really split down the middle. People don't know. And what that tells me is that the brands that will win will be the ones that lead us out and show us what the world should be on the other side. If we see this as a big reset, it will be the brands not just editing what's gone before or reducing impact, but fully laying out how the world should work. There's a brilliant quote, which you've probably heard from Sonia Renee Taylor, an author and poet, who says, "We will not get back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was never normal other than we normalized greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature." And you're seeing that playing out in things like Amsterdam adopting donut economics in order to spur their recovery in a way that is fairer for everyone there and works with the planet. So there's all of that stuff going on, even things like in our own city in London, changing transport infrastructure to allow for social distancing will allow for sort of greener ways of traveling and things. So that's the world, or that's a hopeful, probably lefty, hopeful version of what will emerge on the other side. What we try and do, we can ask consumers don't know, and also my view, asking consumers tends to look backwards unless you ask them good questions. So instead we tend to talk to journalists, talk to experts within Vice Media Group, talk to the people who are used to looking ahead and up and out and shaping culture. And so that's where we try and navigate from for our brands, from those sorts of expert voices. And there are a few things I can talk to you about today. Please just shout if I'm weighing on. So the first one I mentioned before, which is we're starting to see signs that individualism might finally be on its way out. No more obvious space is that playing out than we've gone from a conversation about my personal wellness to our public health. And so it's no longer about juicing some nonsense to make myself look thin and amazing. It's about washing my hands so I don't kill someone in my local supermarket. And we believe that's having quite a powerful effect on people's psychology. So, there were already signs that individualism, and actually all the individualistic nations, the more individualistic, the more they have struggled to respond appropriately. Our own America, whereas anywhere where they have a slightly more collectivist mindset has done a bit better with this. The next one, these are in no particular order, is that we think that cultural influence will begin to happen more east-west. So we've been predicting that for a while, which is cultural influence tends to come from youth. Culture tends to change with those coming to adulthood at that time. And obviously most of the world's youth is in the East. So in China, India, etc. So we've been predicting that for a while at Vice, but actually I think this will speed that up, which is, as they emerge faster, they can shoot things, they can make things. We all start to look that way. South Korea was on top of this while we were all still learning to wash our hands and singing happy birthday. So I think we will look east. I hope we will look east and get all sorts of different stimulus. The grip of Hollywood will loosen even further. Obviously that was already happening, but looks set to continue, hopefully. Um, the fairness thing, which I think probably all of you have thought about, but the inequities of our societies have been shown in sharp relief. So we might get drastic social reform on the other side of this, like the UK did after World War II, when we created the NHS and the welfare state. This is a fairly optimistic lefty perspective on what's going to happen. And then I think there's something going on in the mental health conversation, which is interesting. So if you looked at like the 90s and the noughties, it was about positive psychology. So that was not just psychology that was the freedom from disease, but the positive states of mental well-being. But that kind of went a little bit toxic and went into positive thinking, and everybody being like, everything's fine, even though it wasn't. And so the next step we saw on from that was mindfulness and feeling your feelings and being okay with your feelings and all of that sort of stuff. The conversation that's emerging now is one about resilience. And I think that's interesting because that will filter out into everything. So for example, psychologists know that social isolation is worse for us than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's proven. So they were expecting quite a big mental health fallout from this thing, from everybody trapped in isolation, from healthcare workers dealing with things like moral injury, it's called, where you have to make horrible decisions, all of that stuff. But so the conversation seems to be shifting towards resilience. And what's funny is those mental health conversations, so positive thinking, mindfulness, etc., they tend to filter out into the rest of our lives because they're so pervasive. So they filter out into business and stuff. So I think we'll start to see, instead of thinking about sustainable businesses, we'll start to be talking about more resilient businesses, whether we actually say it like that. It will be, instead of sustainability being this little CSR arm that we do to negate the effects of some bullshit we're doing, setting fire to Australia, essentially, we'll start to be like, oh, no, a resilient business is a healthy, profitable, sustainable system that is nourishing for everyone that works there, and et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully that mental health resilience conversation will go that way. I mean, that's just a few. I think the main thing that we are trying to do really is be a proper partner to our clients. So not be opportunistic, not be salesy, to try and help them navigate that stuff. We have access to all of this information and insight that allows us to sort of predict with them. So we're doing lots of scenario planning and things like that. We're also trying to find our own contribution we can make. So we have sessions every 2 weeks, where we get everybody together from all 27 offices, or everybody who wants to chip in turns up, and it's an idea sharing session where we've come up with all sorts of things like safe soap, where it's soap that actually makes your hands dirty so that you can see how dirty they are, and it takes 20 seconds to wash it off, all the way through to things to do with women struggling with abusive partners on lockdown and things like that. So that has not only been, that's lovely to make a contribution, but it has been very good for everybody's mental health and our connection across the world, because we do try and work as one borderless group rather than lots of different agencies. We're offering, and we also have, which I encourage everyone to do actually, because it's really also quite positive, is we have a sort of open source Google document for all our strategists all over 27 offices around the world to make predictions about what's going to happen. So it's called The World Post COVID-19, and everybody's chipping all this stuff in, which is where a lot of these things I've mentioned today have come from.